Then it became a sheet of red that ran down her neck and over her t-shirt. The people down below were finally beginning to realize what had happened. Her throat had been cut. Then she was still, other than the slightest rhythmic sway of her body.
Okay, she's gone. Show's over, for today anyway. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Drive safely.
People started honking their horns, and there was angry screaming. A police siren finally sounded from somewhere, but it was far off, unable to get through the backed-up traffic. David Hainswiggle started to run in a funny duck waddle. He bobbed around the hairpin turn at the far end of the ramp and disappeared into the bushes. He knew that it didn't matter how many people saw which way he went. Hell, let them search for him all they liked. Who were they going to look for, anyway? Richard Nixon?
Chapter 44. This was as sad and disturbing a homicide scene as I'd ever worked in my years with Metro or the FBI. 2 young people were dead, and the murders seemed arbitrary and just plain cruel. The kids were definitely innocents in whatever was going on here. The GW Parkway had been rerouted, but not without stranding at least a mile-long queue of cars still backed up on the roadway. They were now waiting for a flipped minivan to be cleared away by the police. That required a sign-off from Bree, who needed the medical examiner to finish with the 2 bodies. She had established Metro's jurisdiction here, but not without a heavy dose of animosity from the Arlington County Police Department, which didn't bother Bree in the least. Helicopters flew overhead every few minutes, police and media, the latter always coming too close for comfort. I saw them as peeping toms with a license to look and to shoot film. The crowd, many of whom had witnessed the actual murders, was a strange mixture of angry, aggressive, and scared silly. They were a captive audience, though. We needed to identify some of them as our witnesses, then try to get everyone else moving again. The title of an old Broadway show popped into my head. Stop the World. I Want to Get Off. I really did. The Virginia Highway Department was there in numbers, the state police too, and they were showing their impatience and ire with body language, if nothing else. Bree, Sampson, and I had divided our part of the workload as best we could. Bree was on the immediate crime scene, checking out all the physical evidence. Sampson had the killer's entry and exit from the scene, which had created a huge extended perimeter from the Potomac all the way into Roslyn, Virginia. He had a team of Arlington cops working with him on site. My focus was on the killer and his mindset at the time of the 2 murders. To ascertain this, I needed the best witnesses I could find, and I needed them in a big hurry. With a scene as sprawling as this one, I had no guarantee that the traffic wouldn't start moving again. For the moment, at least, the killer had stopped the world, and nobody was getting off unless he wanted them to. Chapter 45. I did a quick assessment of the cars nearest the bridge, looking for solo white males. Make no mistake about it, I believe in profiling during emergency situations like this one. The more a witness has in common with the criminal they've seen, the more reliable their testimony will be, at least statistically speaking. That had also been my experience at homicide scenes again and again. So I was looking for white males, preferably alone in their vehicles. I settled on a black Honda Accord about 5 car lengths back from the overpass. The man inside was sitting sideways to avoid looking ahead, and he had a cell phone pressed to his ear. His car was running, with the windows rolled up. I rapped hard on the glass. "Metro Police." "Excuse me, sir?" "Sir." "Excuse me." He finally held up his index finger without actually looking around at me. "1 minute?" At that point, I opened the car door for him and showed my creds. "Now, sir, please hang up the phone." "I gotta go," he said to whoever, and stepped outside, full of piss and vinegar, I could tell. "Officer, can you or somebody tell me how long we'll be stuck here?" "Not long," I said. rather than lecture him about the two kids who had just died. "But I need you to tell me exactly what you saw happen on the overpass." He talked fast, with an irritating nonchalance, but his story corroborated what we'd gathered so far. The driver of the Honda had come to a halt seconds after the young male had been thrown down into traffic. "At first I didn't realize what the accident or whatever was all about. I just saw cars suddenly stopping in front of me. But then I saw the dead kid." He pointed to the bridge. "And the one up there, the girl who got her throat cut? Terrible shit. Tragic, right?" He asked the question as if he couldn't figure it out for himself. "Right. Can you describe the man who was on the overpass?" "The killer." "Not really. He had on one of those Halloween masks, the rubber kind you put over your whole head. I think it was supposed to be Richard Nixon. I'm pretty sure. Does that make any sense?" "It does. Thank you for your help," I told the man. "Another officer will come by to take down a few more particulars." The next eyewitness I spoke to was a limo driver who told me the killer looked taller and much heavier than the female victim. Also that he wore a dark windbreaker with no insignia that the driver could make out, and then a few vaguely recollected bits of what had been said over the bullhorn. "That son of a bitch bastard yelled, 'I'm back!' Those were his first words." "Did you notice if he had any kind of camera or recording device up there?" I asked. The limo driver shook his head. "I'm sorry. I honestly don't know. Not that I saw, anyway. There was a lot of confusion." "Still is," I said, and patted the guy on the shoulder. "Anything else you remember?" The limo driver shook his head. "I'm sorry." I managed to squeeze in 4 more witnesses before the GW was open to traffic again. Any further accounting would have to come later. I'd gotten as much during the critical first hours as I could get. I hoped it would help, but I didn't think so. For someone who was putting on live shows, the killer was covering his tracks very well. A few minutes later, Bree, Sampson, and I convened at the west end of the pedestrian bridge, where the killer had apparently fled, at least according to several of the witnesses. "The bushes over there are all trampled down," Sampson said, pointing to a stand of high grass out of sight from the road. "For all we know, he had a motorcycle or something stashed away. So far, we've got nothing more on him." Bree added, "No calling card, by the way." "That's a little weird," I said. "He forgot about his signature this time? Since when does that happen?" "Or he changed his pattern," said Sampson. "Again, since when does that happen?" "Or," I finally said what had been bothering me for a while, "this wasn't the same guy." Then Bree's cell went off. She listened, and her face couldn't have been any more grim. Finally, she looked at the two of us. "Well, he struck again. There's been another murder." Chapter 46.
They weren't gonna know what hit them this time. The killer had arrived at FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland, about 2 hours before kickoff for the first football game of the season. He grabbed a soda and a hot dog, then browsed the Hall of Fame store, not really interested in buying. He wasn't a Redskins fan, not his hometown, but he wanted to blend in with the rest of the sports crowd. For a while, anyway. And then he wanted to stand out. Really stand out. Make his bones. Play his role in the fourth story. Out of the corner of his eye he could see some of the football players warming up. Kickers booming high, long punts and making field goal attempts. It was going to be another sellout crowd. There had never been a Redskins home game that wasn't. There was about a 30-year waiting list for season tickets. And man, did he love sellout crowds for his stories. Some particularly high-spirited fans, the Hogettes, were singing Hail to the Redskins slightly off-key and with off-color lyrics liberally sprinkled in, which seemed weird since there were a lot of kids in the crowd. The so-called superfans wore bright-colored wigs and polka-dot blouses and plastic hog snouts. Some of them were smoking extra-long cigars, which enhanced their piggy image. He hadn't gone quite that far with his outfit, but he was wearing a Redskins cap and jersey, and he had his face painted red and white, the home team's colors. His persona was that of a disgruntled fan named Al Jablonski, a good, solid role to play. 91,000 fans packed the stadium, all waiting for Al Jablonski. They just didn't know it yet. Close to game time, the first ladies of football scampered onto the Technicolor green field. Masses of flying hair and pom-poms, skimpy red halter tops and white short shorts. Family entertainment at its most all-American, the killer couldn't help thinking. The control booth for the stadium scoreboard was located underneath the huge sign. He knew the way and arrived there in time for the national anthem to be sung by a soprano marine from the base down in Quantico. Al Jablonski knocked on the metal door, said, "Couple of messages from Mr. Snyder's office. Vanessa has sent these down." Vanessa was actually the name of one of the owner's assistants. Easy enough to find out. The door opened. There were two guys inside, stat geeks from the looks of them, real antiques. "Hi, I'm Al Jablonski." He shot them both, and the sound of the gun was completely lost under loud cheering from the crowd as the national anthem ended. Sort of took away his thunder. So he sat at the geek's computer and put a message up on the big stadium screen for all to see. "I'm back, and I just wanted to make this Sunday a real killer for everybody. The guys who usually send out these annoying messages and plugs are dead inside the control booth. So enjoy the game without any further interruptions from management or corporate sponsors. Please watch your backs, and your fronts too. I'm in the building, and I could be anywhere and anyone. This is so much better than football, don't you think? Go Skins!"
Chapter 47.
Kyle Craig had just heard the latest good news from Washington, D.C., when his mother slowly opened the 12-foot-high front door of the vacation house near Snowmass outside Aspen. When she saw who it was, the old woman fainted like somebody had hit her off switch. Kyle managed to catch dear old Mom before she struck the stonework floor, and he smiled to himself. It was good to be home again, wasn't it? Moments later, he was reviving the old woman in the cavernous kitchen of the 12,000-square-foot house. "Are you okay? Miriam? Mother?" "William?" she groaned when she looked up at the face staring down at her. "Is that William?" "Now, how could that possibly be?" Kyle asked, and he frowned deeply. "For once, just once, use the intelligence that you were given, that you must have been given. Your husband, my father, William, has been dead for a long time. I helped you bury the general in Alexandria. Don't you remember the glorious day? Sunny skies, crisp, cool breeze, smell of burning leaves in the air. Good Lord, you're losing it, woman. People sent all those flowers congratulating you on gaining your freedom from that hypocritical tyrant and bastard." Suddenly Kyle clasped both hands to his face. "Oh my God, my fault. This is all my fault, Mother. The mask. These prosthetic masks are so damn realistic. I look just like Father in this one, don't I? Finally, I'm living up to the old man's image for me." His mother began to scream, and he let her go on for a bit. There was no one around to hear her raving anyway. His father had never allowed her household help when he was alive, and she still didn't have any staff. How typical was that? She had all the money in the world and nothing to spend it on. He watched the pathetic old woman shake and twist her head back and forth. Ironically, her face was more mask-like than his, a mask of one family's tragedy. "No, it's just me. It's Kyle. I'm out and about again. I wanted to see you, of course, to visit. But the other reason I came, I need some money, Mom. Won't be here for more than a couple of minutes. You'll have to give me the numbers for the overseas accounts, though." After Kyle had finished at the computer in his father's old office, he felt like a new man. He was wealthy now. Nearly $4 million transferred into his account in Zurich. But even more important, he finally felt free. That didn't happen just because a man